It's been requested by my clients that I provide an audio that they can come back to when they're feeling overwhelmed by the events of the world today. I hope you find this track useful. We live in a world of stories, and sometimes the stories are ours, and sometimes they aren't. And from a shamanic perspective, the vibration of the stories that we tell one another and the stories that we take in all create our consciousness. In the world today, we're all seeing the consciousness of our stories manifesting and the collective consciousness of stories manifesting. And due to the access in media for us to all see each other's stories playing out, there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of aggression and a lot of depression because we're seeing stories that we don't connect to and yet we have empathy for. And I think it's critical for us to take back our power by choosing the stories that we let into our minds and choosing the stories that we connect to. If you're watching television all day long and you're wondering why you're feeling so overwhelmed, that is why. Because unconsciously and consciously, you're taking in other people's aggressive stories constantly. And you need to turn off the TV, turn off the news, and decide what stories you're going to be telling yourself consciously on a daily basis. This is a critical time in human history when we need to take back control of our minds and our emotions, because if you allow yourself to be run constantly by the stories that you're being told in the media, which are directly created to create an emotional response in us, then you're not allowing for yourself to have the life that you choose. So here's a practice for you right now. And you can use a pen and paper if you choose to take notes. I'd like you to close your eyes. And I would like you to imagine for a moment that all the things going on in your world today are stories that are being told. There is the story of something about your work. There is the story of something about your kids, or something about your partner, or something about living alone, or something about your cat. These are all stories within your world that you're telling yourself on a daily basis. I want you to start listing those stories in your mind and give them captions. This is the story I'm telling myself every day. I'm telling myself every day that this is hard, or this is easy, or I enjoy this, or I really don't like this, or I feel trapped, or I feel free, and just start running through the stories in your mind that you're telling yourself. And you can write them down if you'd like to. I think writing things down is a really useful tool. So stop this audio for a moment and do that now. And now that you have your list of stories, or at least the main stories that you're telling yourself, I want you to also recognize what stories are your stories and what stories did you take on from other people. What stories are you allowing others to tell you about yourself, your world, your life, the world that you live in? What are the stories that you're allowing into your consciousness? And I want you to notice for a moment, are those stories useful for you? Because if we're taking in someone else's story and it's not a story we align with, we're going to have some internal dissonance. We're going to have some internal structures where we are feeling fear or we're feeling anxiety because it doesn't feel right to us. So I want you to notice what stories don't feel right to you. And what stories are you taking on that aren't yours? And for right now, all I want you to do is gain the awareness of what's going on. What is going on inside of you unconsciously on a daily basis? Because when we bring that to consciousness, when we start to understand the stories that are creating our world, not the world, but our internal consciousness, our world, when we recognize the stories that we're choosing to take on to create that world, it can help us understand why we're feeling anxious, or why we're feeling alone, or why we're feeling emotions that we really don't want to be feeling. It will also help us understand why we feel joyful, why we feel connected. If we're telling ourselves stories that align with who we are and who we want to be, we're going to feel more connected. In this audio, I'm not going to go through how to change your story, but I'll do that in the future. Right now, I just want you to notice the stories that you're taking on. And now it's up to you to start to make choices. Are these the stories I want to keep living? Because there is the personal consciousness of stories. There is the consciousness of daily life, of the world that we choose to create for ourselves. And then there's the global consciousness that's going on right now. And we need to disconnect from the global sometimes. We can't live in global consciousness all the time because the stories being told there are mostly not ours. And while we may connect with them sometimes, we can't live in someone else's stories and ever feel free, happy, centered, or at peace. I hope this was a useful video for you to perhaps look at this a little bit differently, because there are so many stories going on right now. And I hope you choose some stories that make you feel loved and alive and joyful and free as you find who you want to be right now in a world that's changing. Many blessings.